The morning dew still clung to the grass as Thomas made his way through the village outskirts, carrying 2 wooden buckets toward the well. At 19, he had performed this daily ritual countless times, but today felt different somehow. The air seemed to shimmer with an unusual energy, and the birds had fallen peculiarly silent. He had just begun to lower the first bucket when a soft humming filled the air. Not the familiar buzz of insects or distant machinery, but something ethereal that made his skin tingle. The sound grew until it seemed to resonate within his chest, and then, in a flash of silvery light that forced him to shield his eyes, she appeared. When he lowered his arm, Thomas found himself staring at the most extraordinary woman he had ever seen. She stood barely 10 paces away, her platinum hair floating as if suspended in water, defying gravity with each gentle movement. Her eyes were the color of Earth's clearest oceans, but with an otherworldly depth that seemed to hold entire galaxies within them. She wore what appeared to be liquid starlight, a flowing garment that shifted and sparkled with every breath, revealing and concealing the elegant curves of her form. "Please don't be alarmed," she said, her voice carrying the same melodic quality as the humming that had heralded her arrival. The words formed in his mind even though her lips moved in unfamiliar patterns. "I mean you no harm. My name is Lyra." Thomas realized he had been holding his breath. He exhaled slowly, his hands trembling as he set down the bucket. I'm Thomas," he managed to say. What are you?" A smile played across her lips, and Thomas felt his heart skip a beat. "I'm from what you would call the Andromeda galaxy," she said, taking a step toward him. Her movements were impossibly graceful, as if she were dancing to music only she could hear. "My world is much like yours, but we've learned to traverse the spaces between stars." "Why are you here?" Thomas asked, finding his voice growing stronger even as his mind struggled to process what was happening. Lyra's expression turned playful, her head tilting slightly as she studied him. "Would you believe me if I said I was drawn to you? We've been observing your village for some time, and something about you caught my attention." She moved closer still, and Thomas caught the scent of something sweet and exotic, like flowers that had never bloomed on Earth. That's impossible," he stammered, though he couldn't take his eyes off her. "I'm just a village boy. I tend to crops and carry water and dream of something more?" she interrupted, now close enough that he could see the subtle iridescence of her skin. "I've watched you, Thomas. When you think no one's looking, you stare at the stars. You wonder what's out there. Don't you want to find out?" Their eyes met, and Thomas felt something electric pass between them. He knew he should run, should alert the village, should do anything but stand there mesmerized by this beautiful alien being. But as Lyra reached out and gently touched his cheek with fingers that felt like warm silk, all thoughts of should and shouldn't evaporated like morning mist in the sun. "I shouldn't be here," she whispered, though she made no move to withdraw her hand. "Contact with developing worlds is forbidden. But sometimes—" She leaned closer, her breath warm against his ear. "The most beautiful moments in life come from breaking the rules." The well bucket lay forgotten on the ground as the sun continued its climb into the morning sky, casting long shadows across the grass where a farm boy and a starwalker stood on the precipice of something that would change both their worlds forever. Throughout the day, Thomas moved through his chores in a daze, his mind constantly returning to the morning's encounter. The water buckets had eventually made it back to his family's cottage, though he couldn't quite remember carrying them. His mother had asked if he was feeling ill, noting his flushed cheeks and distant expression. He'd mumbled something about the heat and retreated to the fields. Now, as the sun began its descent, he sat at the edge of the village pond, absently tossing pebbles into the still water. The ripples reminded him of the way Lyra's dress had moved, like liquid starlight catching cosmic winds. "You're thinking about me." Her voice materialized behind him, causing him to start and nearly slip into the pond. She laughed, a sound like wind chimes in a summer breeze, and settled beside him on the grassy bank. "How did you—" he began, but she pressed a finger to his lips, sending tingles through his entire body. "I can sense your thoughts when they're directed at me." she explained, her eyes twinkling with mischief. It's how my people communicate across vast distances. Your mind has been practically shouting my name all day. Thomas felt his face grow hot. Then you know everything I've been thinking about? Lyra's smile turned sultry. Not everything, just the intensity and direction of your thoughts. Though, she leaned closer, her platinum hair brushing his shoulder. I can guess at some of their nature. This is madness, Thomas whispered, though he made no attempt to move away. You're from another galaxy. I don't even know what you really are, if this is even your true form. Does it matter? She took his hand, placing it against her chest where he could feel the steady rhythm of what seemed to be a heartbeat, faster than a human's, but undeniably real. I'm as real as you are, Thomas, just different. My people can adapt our forms to suit different environments. This is me, interpreted through your world's physical laws. The scientific implications of her words were lost on Thomas as her fingers intertwined with his. The setting sun painted the sky in deep purples and reds, colors that seemed to dance across her iridescent skin. I should go, she said, though she moved closer instead of away. My research team will notice my absence soon. We're supposed to remain undetected, studying your world from afar. Then why risk it? Thomas asked, finally voicing the question that had been nagging at him all day. Why reveal yourself to me? Lyra's expression softened. Because in all my travels across thousands of light years, I've never encountered anyone who looked at the stars the way you do, with such longing. She reached up to trace the line of his jaw. My people believe that similar souls call to each other across the cosmos. Maybe that's what drew me to you. And what happens now? His voice was barely a whisper. Now! She stood in one fluid motion, pulling him up with her. Now I show you why the stars dance. The air around them began to shimmer, and Thomas felt a curious lightness in his limbs. As the first stars began to appear in the darkening sky, Lyra pulled him into what seemed like an embrace, but when he looked down, his feet were no longer touching the ground. Trust me, she whispered against his lips, and the world around them transformed into a tunnel of light. When Thomas's vision cleared, he found himself standing in what appeared to be a clearing, but everything was different. The grass beneath his feet gave off a faint phosphorescent glow, and twin moons hung in a violet sky. The air itself seemed to sparkle with tiny points of light that drifted like cosmic fireflies. Where are we? He gasped, reaching out to touch one of the floating lights. It danced away from his fingers playfully. Still on Earth, Lyra answered, watching his wonderment with evident pleasure. But I've shifted us slightly out of phase with your reality. There's a pocket dimension where our worlds overlap. My people use these spaces to conduct our research without interfering with developing civilizations. She gestured toward what looked like a waterfall in the distance, except the liquid flowing down was golden and seemed to flow upward as often as down. Here, the laws of physics are more flexible. I thought it might be easier for you to understand me if you could see a glimpse of how I perceive your world. Thomas turned slowly, taking in the alien landscape. What he had initially thought was a clearing was actually a perfect circle of luminescent vegetation, surrounded by trees whose leaves shifted colors like mood rings. It's beautiful, he breathed. But why show me all this? Won't you get in trouble? Lyra moved closer, her body giving off a subtle glow that matched the environment. Almost certainly, she admitted, running her fingers down his arm. But I've spent decades observing humans, studying your cultures, your emotions, your capacity for love. She pressed herself against him, and Thomas felt that curious lightness again, as if gravity itself was negotiable here. I've watched you for months, seeing how different you are from the others in your village, how you yearn for something more. And what about you? Thomas asked, his hands finding her waist, marveling at how the fabric of her dress seemed to respond to his touch, swirling with new patterns of light. What do you yearn for? Her answer was to kiss him, and Thomas's world exploded into sensation. Her lips tasted like stardust and sweet summer wine, and where their bodies touched, he felt sparks of energy dancing across his skin. He could sense her consciousness brushing against his, not reading his thoughts, but sharing her emotions, her desire, her forbidden fascination with him. "We shouldn't," she whispered against his mouth, even as her fingers tangled in his hair. "The protocols. Damn the protocols," Thomas surprised himself by saying. He pulled her closer, feeling bolder in this strange space where reality itself seemed fluid. "Show me more." Lyra's eyes lit up, literally, with an inner fire that made the blue of her irises glow like captured nebulae. She waved her hand, and suddenly they were floating several inches off the ground, surrounded by a cocoon of those drifting lights. "My superiors would say I'm corrupting your species' natural development," she murmured, trailing kisses down his neck that left tingling paths of light on his skin. "That humans aren't ready for what I could show you." "And what do you say?" Thomas managed to ask, though it was becoming difficult to form coherent thoughts as the energy field around them intensified. Her smile turned wicked. "I say that some rules deserve to be broken." As night fell fully in both realities, the strange bioluminescent forest bore witness to a union that defied the laws of both nature and cosmic protocol. In their private dimension between worlds, a farm boy and an interdimensional researcher discovered that passion knows no planetary bounds. Dawn was approaching in the real world when Lyra finally returned Thomas to the pond's edge. His clothes were slightly rumpled but otherwise showed no sign of their dimensional adventure. His skin, however, still held a faint luminescence, and his eyes seemed to reflect starlight even in the growing daylight. "Will I see you again?" he asked, reluctant to let go of her hand. Their night together had been beyond anything he could have imagined, passion intertwined with cosmic energy, love-making that literally defied gravity. His body still hummed with residual energy from their encounter. Lyra's expression clouded for the first time since they'd met. "I don't know," she admitted, touching his face gently. "What we did. It's more serious than just breaking protocols. The energy exchange between us." She broke off, biting her lip. "What is it?" Thomas felt a knot forming in his stomach. Did something happen? She placed her hand over his heart, and he gasped as he saw it glowing with a faint blue light beneath his shirt. "When we merged," she said carefully, "there was a transfer. My cosmic essence. It's begun bonding with your cellular structure." "Is that dangerous?" Thomas asked, though he was surprised to find he wasn't scared, just curious. "Not exactly," Lyra replied, her fingers tracing the glow. "But it's irreversible, and it's changing you at a quantum level. This kind of cross-species genetic melding. It's precisely what our containment protocols were designed to prevent." Thomas caught her hand and held it against his chest. "I don't care about protocols. I don't care if I'm changing. Last night was revolutionary," she finished, a mix of pride and worry in her voice. "You're the first human to ever experience dimensional synthesis. Your consciousness expanded into spaces it was never meant to reach." She paused, studying him intently. "And you handled it remarkably well." The sun was rising in earnest now, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold that seemed pale compared to the colors Thomas had witnessed in their private realm. Already, the events of the night were taking on a dreamlike quality, but the tingles running through his body and the faint glow beneath his skin proved it had all been real. "They're calling for me?" Lyra said suddenly, her head tilting as if listening to a distant sound. "The research team has noticed the energy fluctuations. They'll trace them back here soon." She looked at him with a mixture of longing and determination. "I have to go." "Wait." Thomas caught her arm as she turned to leave. "You still haven't explained what's happening to me. What this change means." Lyra's eyes sparkled with that familiar mischief, though there was something else there now, something almost like hope. "Let's just say," she whispered, leaning in to kiss him one last time, "that the stars may not seem so far away anymore." Before he could respond, she stepped back and began to fade from view. But just before she disappeared completely, her voice echoed in his mind. "Watch for the third moon, my love. Some rules are meant to be broken. Again and again." Thomas stood alone by the pond, his heart racing as the morning sun revealed his transformed reflection in the water. His eyes now held tiny specks of light, like captured stars, and beneath his skin, patterns of energy danced like auroras. He smiled, knowing this was far from the end. A month passed, and Thomas's transformation continued. He kept to himself, wearing long sleeves to hide the shifting patterns beneath his skin, making excuses to avoid the village gatherings. At night, he would lie in the fields, watching his newly illuminated flesh pulse in harmony with the stars above. He discovered abilities, small ones at first. He could sense the electromagnetic fields of approaching storms, could make small objects float when his emotions ran high. The villagers began to whisper about the strange lights they'd seen in the fields at night, about how the farmer's sun seemed to glow from within when he thought no one was watching. Then came the night of the third moon. It appeared suddenly, a luminous silver orb joining Earth's familiar satellite in the sky. Most of the villagers ran to their homes in terror, but Thomas stood in his field, heart racing with anticipation. The air began to hum with that now familiar energy. "I told you I'd find a way back." Lyra's voice came from behind him. When he turned, she wasn't alone. 3 other figures stood with her, tall and elegant in their cosmic forms. Unlike Lyra, they hadn't fully adapted to appear human. Their bodies were semi-transparent and seemed to be made of living light. "Thomas," Lyra said, her eyes bright with excitement, "meet my research team, or as they prefer to be called now, our rebellion." The tallest of the light beings stepped forward. When it spoke, its voice resonated directly in Thomas's mind. "Your union with Lyra was unprecedented," it said. "We expected catastrophe, genetic breakdown, a disruption of the universal order. A ripple of what might have been amusement passed through its glowing form. Instead, you showed us that our protocols were based on fear rather than wisdom." "We've been wrong," another of the beings added, "about so many things. About humans, about the nature of species barriers, about the very laws we thought governed cross-dimensional relationships." Lyra moved to Thomas's side, taking his hand. Where their fingers intertwined, their shared luminescence created patterns of incredible beauty. "They're not here to punish us," she explained. "They're here to learn from us. And," she squeezed his hand, "to offer you a choice. The changes in your cellular structure are permanent," the third being explained. "You can never fully return to your former state. But you can choose. Remain here, learn to control your new abilities in secret, live a life between worlds." Paused significantly. "Or come with us. Into the stars?" Thomas asked, though he already knew the answer. He could feel it thrumming in his transformed cells. "As an equal," Lyra added. "Not a test subject or a specimen. As living proof that the boundaries between species are more fluid than we imagined. We could explore the cosmos together, find others like us. Or," the tall being interjected, "we could establish the first official Earth observation post right here. Train you to be a bridge between our civilizations. Prepare humanity for the knowledge that they're not alone." Thomas looked at his illuminated skin, at the woman he loved, at the incredible beings offering him a future beyond anything he dreamed of when he was just a farm boy staring at the stars. In his heart, patterns of light danced with possibilities. "Why choose?" he asked finally, a smile playing on his lips. After all, he pulled Lyra close, watching the energy patterns between them spiral and merge. Some rules are meant to be broken. Above them, the third moon pulsed like a cosmic heartbeat, and somewhere in the vast spaces between stars, new protocols were being written, protocols that spoke not of separation and fear, but of connection, transformation, and the infinite possibilities that arise when love dares to cross the boundaries of space itself.